You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. Unfortunately, I have to start off by eulogizing someone, one of the greatest goalies in NHL history. That, of course, is Tony Esposito, who died yesterday at the age of 78 from pancreatic cancer. Tony Esposito is without question one of the greatest goalies in NHL history. In fact, one of the biggest travesties in NHL history is the fact that he never won a Stanley Cup. It's right up there with a guy like Marcel Dion not winning a cup, Mike Gartner, Jerome McGinley, Roberto Luongo, Lundqvist, Cujo, etc., etc. Here's a guy who revolutionized goaltending. He was one of the first goalies to be a butterfly goalie. In the old days, a lot of goalies never went to their knees. You watch the old hockey clips, they could be beaten very easily low glove or 5-hole. Esposito changed that. And because of that, he became one of the greatest goalies in NHL history. Not too many people know this, but Tony Esposito actually came up with the Montreal Canadiens. In fact, his first ever start was in a Canadiens-Bruins game. The final score was 2-2. I didn't know this. Thank you, Wikipedia. You know who scored both goals for the Bruins that day? Phil Esposito. So think about that. Tony Esposito's first start in the NHL was against his brother's team. Imagine being in the Esposito house watching the brothers practice hockey. Phil taking shots, Tony making saves. Obviously, there was no way to know it at the time, but you were watching the birth of two legends. I don't know if there are any Esposito home movies of Phil taking shots on Tony, but if they exist, please, please, please put them on YouTube. Now, you gotta realize something. Esposito came up in 68-69. The Canadiens already had two great goalies. They had the veteran Gump Worsley, who was nearing the end of the line, and they had Rogie Vachon, another great goalie. In fact, prior to Esposito coming up in 68-69, Vachon won the Vezina Trophy in 67-68. The Canadiens didn't need two young goalies, so they let Esposito go to the Blackhawks, in essence, via waivers. The NHL had something called the intra-league draft. In essence, it was waivers. Esposito immediately became great for the Blackhawks. He led the NHL in wins, save percentage, and shutouts in his rookie year. That year, he won the Calder Trophy, the Vezina Trophy, and was the runner-up to Bobby Orr in Hart Trophy voting. The year after that, Esposito would have his best chance to win a Stanley Cup. Once again, he led the NHL in wins with 35. The Blackhawks that year were absolutely fantastic. They had Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, Dennis Hull, Bobby's brother. No one remembers him, unfortunately. They had Pitt Martin, Brian Campbell, Pat Stapleton. Really, really good team. After sweeping the Flyers in the quarterfinals and narrowly beating the Rangers in 7 games in the semifinals, one of the worst series losses in Rangers history, Esposito went up against his old team in the Stanley Cup Finals. You know that Esposito wanted to stick it to his old team. It looked good for him early on. The Blackhawks won the first 2 games. They traveled to Montreal in the driver's seat, but then the Canadiens won 4 of the next 5 games. Interestingly enough, it wasn't even Rogie Vachon that lifted the Canadiens to victory. It was Ken Dryden. That was Dryden's Conn Smythe year. The year after that, Esposito led the NHL in save percentage, goals against, and shutouts. He shared the Vezina Trophy with his backup, Gary Smith. The year after that, the Blackhawks made it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Blackhawks destroyed the Blues in 5 games, then destroyed the Rangers in 5 games. But they were really no match for the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost in 6 games. Little did anyone know that that would be the last Stanley Cup Final that Tony Esposito would ever appear in. In 73-74, he won the Vezina Trophy again. He did have to share it, though, but this time it wasn't with his backup. It was with Bernie Parent. Then Esposito had one of the most dominant stretches that a goalie has ever had. In a 7-year stretch, from 74-75 to 80-81, Esposito led all goalies in games played 4 times, saves made 5 times, and minutes played 6 times. Also in 79-80, he led the NHL in shutouts with 6. It's impossible to overstate Tony Esposito's greatness. the Blackhawks were just never able to put a great roster around him after 1973. I'm an Islanders fan, okay? I hate the Rangers with a burning passion. But, at the end of the day, it is pretty sad that Henrik Lundqvist only made one Stanley Cup Finals. More to the point, he ended up losing that Stanley Cup Finals. Thank you, Alec Martinez. At the end of the day, you want the greats of the game to win a championship, regardless of the sport. Before Mike Trout retires, he should have a World Series ring. Before Derrick Henry retires, if you want to call him great, you probably can. He's led the NFL in rushing back-to-back years. He should have a Super Bowl ring. Before Chris Paul retires, he should have an NBA title under his belt. Same thing with James Harden. You want the greats of the game to win the ultimate prize. Esposito was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1988. The Blackhawks retired as number 35 the same year. Also that year, 88 was a big year for him, Esposito became GM of the Penguins. His two biggest moves were drafting Mark Recchi and trading for Tom Barrasso. He is without question one of the greatest goalies in NHL history. He'd be regarded as a consensus top 5 or top 10 goalie all time if he won a Stanley Cup. That's how great he was. May he rest in peace. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And I want to start with the New York Mets. Their GM, Zach Scott, spoke to the media yesterday, and he made some interesting comments. He acknowledged that the Mets have been, quote, unacceptably bad, unquote. No one would disagree with that. The Mets are probably the coldest team in baseball. Either them or the Red Sox. It is close. I couldn't be happier about that. But he also made another comment, and it's probably one of the weirdest comments I've ever heard a GM make in any sport. In essence, Scott said that all the injuries that have plagued the Mets this year are at least partially due to the players themselves. These may be the greatest 2 lines ever said by a general manager ever. Even though everyone's on you to hydrate, at some point you've got to take the responsibility. We're not just going to stick a needle in someone to hydrate them. So let this be a lesson to every baseball player in existence. If you drink a lot of water, you will stay healthy. You will play in 162 games. You'll beat Cal Ripken's streak. You'll be the new Iron Man. I mean, that may be the dumbest statement I've ever heard in my life. These guys need to hydrate more. Where's Andy from the Fire Festival documentary? These guys need water. I mean, look, drinking water is important, I know that Tom Brady drinks a lot of water. I try to drink a good amount of water. I'm not a big soda drinker. Usually when I'm out to eat, I just have water. I'm the weird guy. Everyone else is ordering coffee, tea, soda. I'm fine with water. I'm not saying water isn't important, but to insinuate that these players are getting hurt because they're not drinking enough water is just ludicrous. Even if that's true, you can't say it. We need to gather up all the injured Mets. Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Francisco Lindor, etc., 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 and ask them how much water they drink. If they're not drinking a lot of water, okay, maybe that's an issue. I mean, I find it hard to believe that those guys wouldn't have gotten hurt if they were properly hydrated. I'm not saying that being hydrated isn't important, okay? It is. There's no question. You don't need me to tell you that. But to insinuate that these guys wouldn't have gotten hurt if they drank lots of water is just ridiculous. And now you can hear my Long Island accent. Water. W-A-T-T-A-H. That is how every Long Islander pronounces water. Again, I just keep going back to this in my head. To insinuate that these guys wouldn't be on the IL if they drank lots of water is absurd. You have no proof of that. Maybe it's contributing to the injuries. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But you come off like a schmuck when you say that. I mean, I'm done talking about water for now. I feel like I've done it enough. I think I've met my water quota for today. So let's get to the first part of Scott's comments. That the Mets have been unacceptably bad. Yeah, they have been. No question about that. Now let me just dispel something right off the bat. There are some people who will say that the Mets aren't putting out a good lineup. What do you expect? Take a look at the lineup yesterday in the suspended game. Nimmo, McNeil, Alonso, Smith, Conforto, Davis, VR, McCann, and Carrasco. There is not a single player in that lineup that isn't a major leaguer. Are there players in that lineup that are struggling? Yes. No question. Alonso hasn't been great. He's only hitting .245. Dom Smith is hitting just .254. Michael Conforto's barely hitting over 200. Jonathan Villar's hitting just .235. Although in all fairness to him, he's playing too much. He's had to play a lot because the Mets have been decimated by injury. James McCann hasn't been great. He's hitting just .243. Should have gone after Real Muto. Look, those guys aren't having great years, but they're all major leaguers. There's no one in that starting lineup yesterday that you can say doesn't deserve a spot on a major league roster. You want to tell me the pitching staff isn't that good? That's nonsense. The Mets have a good rotation right now. They don't have an ace. But there's no one in the rotation right now that shouldn't be. Marcus Stroman, Taijuan Walker, Rich Hill, Tyler McGill, and Carlos Carrasco. Those guys all deserve a spot in the rotation. McGill has been really darn good since coming up. The Mets don't have a great bullpen, I'll give you that. But the notion that the Mets don't have enough talent to win is just wrong. I've seen that argument on Mets Twitter. It's not true. The reality is, the reason the Mets are struggling is because of a guy who I've praised in the past. I said in my interview with Andy Martino that I like Luis Rojas. He has done a terrible job in the second half of the season. The Mets entered the All-Star break in first place in the NL East. The Phillies aren't world beaters. The Braves had lost Ronald Acuna. It looked like the Mets were gonna waltz to the NL East title. But they have free-fallen since then. They are 9-15 since the All-Star break. They just finished up a big road trip against two division rivals. 4 games in Miami, 3 in Philadelphia. They only won 1 game. That was against the Marlins. The Phillies were trailing the Mets in the standings before their series with the Mets started. By the end of the series, they'd leapfrogged the Mets. Zach Wheeler, a former Met, that they were happy to let walk. We don't want to give you that contract. Have fun in Philly. Kills the Mets on Sunday. Pitches a 2-hit complete game shutout. I understand that Zach Wheeler is having a really, really good season. He was an all-star. But the optic of you being shut out by a pitcher that you let walk in an incredibly important game is terrible. And the thing that really ticks me off about this is that the Mets don't seem bothered by it. They're in 3rd place in the NL East, behind the Phillies and Braves. They're 2 games out of a playoff spot. They're acting like they're 10 games in front of the 2nd place team in the NL East. Alonso's saying that everything's fine. Rojas is saying that everything's fine. Steve Cohen is saying that everything's fine. Where's the fire? You're either the coldest or 2nd coldest team in baseball, depending on how you view the Red Sox. I'm not saying you need to throw a chair like Brodie Van Wagenen, but it would be nice if the manager, the owner, someone, anyone, showed a little bit of heart. They just think, yeah, we're going to turn it around. It's fine. It's all good. They are the epitome of that gif of the house on fire and the dog is drinking the coffee saying, this is fine. They are the epitome of that. Let me ask you something. Mets hierarchy. Is where you are in the standings acceptable to you? 3rd place in the NL East, 1 game over 500, 2 games out of a playoff spot. Is that acceptable to you? If it is, okay. I'm a Yankees fan. I don't mind that. But I don't think Mets fans would like that. This is a team that had playoff hopes. This is a team that traded for Javi Baez. The Mets are under this delusion that everything's going to work out for them in the end. It's possible that it does, but it's not going to be gifted to them. I mean, you've got to realize something. After this 3-game set against the Nationals, the Mets have 13 straight games against the Dodgers and Giants. Arguably the 2 best teams in baseball. If you're gonna put it together, now's the time. So to say that everything's fine isn't just nonsensical, it's plain wrong. Because there's nothing stopping the Mets from going 3-10 against those teams. They had the opportunity to beat up on the Marlins, to beat up on the Phillies, to beat up on the Nationals. Inferior teams to the Giants and Dodgers. They didn't do it. Everything's not fine. The Mets are at DEFCON 1. There's a strong chance that in just 2.5 weeks, we say the Mets' playoff hopes are dead. It's unsalvageable. After the second game today, because the Mets are completing yesterday's game today, that game was suspended, and then they're playing the regularly scheduled game, I want to see or hear fireworks from the Mets clubhouse. You don't have a lot of time left to save your season. And make no mistake about it, their season needs saving. They're 2 games out of a playoff spot. I'm telling you, there's a strong possibility that in 2.5 weeks, the Mets' season, for all intents and purposes, will be over. The Subway Series at Citi Field on 9/11 weekend will have more Yankees fans than Mets fans if the Mets' horrific play keeps up. I brought up the Red Sox a little earlier. Let's go in depth on them. They're another team that's free-falling. They're 2-8 in their last 10. They were leading the AL East not that long ago. Now they're 5 games behind the Rays. They're 2 games in front of the Yankees for the second wild card. I mean, the way that they lost yesterday's game is nothing short of incredible. Eduardo Rodriguez pitches great. Goes 5 1/3 innings, only gives up 2 runs. He gets pulled too early. I would have liked him to have had the opportunity to work out first and second, 1 man out, but I understand that the score was 4-2. You want to shut the door there. I understand the logic. I disagree with it, but I understand the logic. That's what a lot of managers do nowadays. Again, I disagree with it. But in all fairness to Alex Cora, Hirokazu Sawamura came in and got 2 straight outs. So Garrett Whitlock comes in, a former Yankee, someone who has been excellent for the Red Sox this year. He's 4-1 with a 1.46 ERA. He absolutely imploded He gave up 2 runs in the 7th. The Rays tied the game at 4. Then the top of the 9th hits. The Red Sox bring in their closer, Matt Barnes. That's the right thing to do, since the game was at Fenway. Barnes this year has been really good. He was an all-star. He's 6-5. Before yesterday, he had a 2.78 ERA. Has he struggled recently? The answer is yes, but overall he's been really good this year. He absolutely imploded. Randy Arozarena doubled. Nelson Cruz struck out. Wander Franco walked. Yandy Diaz struck out. Austin Meadows walked. Francisco Mejia hit a single, then ended up scoring 3 Rays because of a terrible play by Hunter Renfroe. I know that playing the outfield at Fenway Park is tough, but how do you let that ball by you if you're Renfroe? Shades of Bill Buckner. You want to tell me that the loss is more on Renfroe than it is Barnes? No, I disagree with that. You've got to realize something. Barnes had runners at first and second, 2 men out. A good closer shuts the door right there and gives his team an opportunity to win it in the bottom of the 9th. But he walked Austin Meadows and gave up a single to Mejia. At the end of the day, Mejia was credited with 2 RBIs. Why? Because the fact that he got a hit resulted in those 2 runs scoring. Who gave up the hit? Matt Barnes. At the end of the day, Renfroe was only responsible for the 7th run being scored. Martin Perez came in to replace Barnes. He gave up an RBI single to Brandon Lau. By then, the score was 8-4 Rays. The Red Sox went 1-2-3. The Red Sox right now are in a lot of trouble. They were sitting pretty not that long ago. Now they've got the Yankees hot on their heels. They've got the Blue Jays hot on their heels. The Mariners have kind of faded out because Jerry Dipoto upset the apple cart too much by trading Kendall Graveman. That's what people mean when they say they don't want to make a trade just for the sake of making a trade. Trading Graveman and replacing him with Castillo is like the literal definition of making trades to make trades. All that did was tick off the locker room. You didn't get any better. But as for the Red Sox, they're a team in crisis right now. They're getting killed by the Boston media for not adding pitching at the deadline. All they did was trade for Kyle Schwarber. Yeah, I mean, look, that's a valid criticism of Chaim Bloom. The Red Sox have had years where their leaky pens have cost them chances at doing special things. At the end of the day, Bloom didn't learn from history. What did he do? Trade for Hansel Robles. What did he freaking do? I got news for you. No one's going to mistake Hansel Robles for Ugueth Urbina anytime soon. There is still time for the Red Sox to turn this around. The division may be tough, but they do have some games left against the Rays. 9 to be specific. I wouldn't say it's impossible. for the Red Sox to come back and, if not win the division, certainly make the playoffs. Maybe even get the first wild card, finish ahead of the Athletics. How does a Red Sox-Yankees one-game playoff sound? Garrett Cole versus Chris Sale. That sounds pretty darn good to me. Moving on now to Diamondbacks-Giants. An absolutely wild game. The Giants are up 5-0 after 5. The Diamondbacks score 5 in the 6th. The Giants score 2 in the bottom of the 8th. The Diamondbacks score 2 in the top of the 9th. And then the Giants win on a walk-off error by Christian Walker. The reason why I breezed through that game is because it's not news that the Giants beat the Diamondbacks. Of course the Giants beat the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks stink. They're the worst team in baseball. We all know that. What we don't all know is that the Giants are the best team in baseball. They have the best record in the majors. They've been dominant all year. They really should have been at the top of the power rankings from, May to now. I said this on the MLB trade deadline recap show. I'll say it again. While the Dodgers and the Padres are getting all the headlines, the Giants are just quietly dominating. They really only made one trade to improve their roster at the deadline. It was right before the clock struck 4 o'clock, so it got buried underneath other trades. But it was absolutely masterful by Farhan Zaidi, trading Alexander Canario and Caleb Killian for Chris Bryant. Bryant has been nothing short of fantastic since going to the Giants. He's hitting .314. He's playing third, he's playing left, he's playing center. It's been the perfect fit. I mean, it's kind of funny. The Dodgers and the Padres are getting all the headlines. They're not even the best team in their state. I understand that the Dodgers are going to get the headlines after trading for Scherzer and Turner. Alright, give them the headline then. But after that, after the novelty of that wears off, give the Giants their due. They're the only team in baseball with 70 wins. Their offense has been really good. Their pitching has been outstanding. The San Francisco Giants at this very moment are my pick to win the World Series. It's no sure thing that the Dodgers are going to beat them in the NLDS. Same thing with the Padres. Yes, the Dodgers and Padres are sexier, but that doesn't mean they're better. I'll tell you this right now. Just as the Dodgers-Padres wildcard game is going to be a dogfight, the NLDS between the Giants and the winner of that wildcard game is also going to be a dogfight. In fact, it may be a better dogfight. I'll close this show out with some NBA Valk talk. Specifically on the Celtics signing Dennis Schroder to a 1-year deal worth $5.89 million. there's no question that Kemba Walker is better than Schroder. But if you want to move on from Walker, you think he's a bad fit, you want to get his contract off the books, replacing him with Schroder is absolutely fantastic. I mean, Schroeder's just a really good player. Can score in multiple ways, really good passer, good defender. Think about this starting five for a minute. Schroder, Josh Richardson, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and either Al Horford or Robert Williams. I'd probably start Horford. That's not earth-shattering, but it's really good. Like, I'll tell you, I wasn't overly confident in the Celtics making the playoffs before this signing. I thought they'd sneak in, maybe they'd have to play in the play-in tournament. Now I think it's very possible that they'll be one of the top 6 seeds in the East. I'm not going to say that they'll be one of the top 6 seeds definitively, but it's very possible. You got to realize, the East is stacked. Go through all the teams that you can make a legitimate argument for to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Atlanta, Boston, Brooklyn, Chicago, Indiana, Miami, Milwaukee, the Knicks, the Sixers, and the Wizards. That's 10 teams. So we know what 10 teams are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. We just don't know the order. The Celtics will be in the mix. There's no question about that. Tomorrow, you're going to get an interview that I'm going to do with Kent Babb, the author of Across the River, Life, Death, and Football in an American City. Very powerful book. It's an enjoyable read for both sports fans and non-sports fans. I think the interview will be the same. Until then, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.